Yes.
You were talking about your brother always wants to do the right thing. It reminded me of when I was reading G.K. Chesterton and how he said that saying that to not accept the existence of God and to say there is a right thing is it's like an oxymoron. It's like there cannot, you can't define good without acknowledging a higher power, and that higher power, you know, he said logically is the God according to the Catechism, because he's real. I mean, G.K. Chesterton, I really think he's like the Thomas Aquinas of the 20th century, but he is. But the basic idea is to achieve a definition of good, there needs to be something outside yourself that defines it. Yeah. And that, I think, yeah, I mean, he does a really good job and a very funny job at explaining that. But you were just talking about that, and I just thought it would bring G.K. Chesterton up.
Yeah, that's a great point. It reminds me of C.S. Lewis in a book I'd want to recommend to you, The Joyful Christian. There's about 50 topics in there, about 2 pages each. It's called The Joyful Christian. Don't all get your pens out at once. No, I was kidding. And there's a point in there where he says, just what you were saying, the problem with the argument, there can be no God because there are injustices in the world, is problematic for the same reason. Where does an idea of just and unjust come if there is no God that sets that standard? So it's a really good point. Yeah. Any other questions? I'll let there be a long pause, because sometimes in the classroom, like, the best question comes after a really awkward silence. Yes?
I'm having trouble formulating this question. So please bear with me. Basically, it's like, what would you say to someone who's caught in a position where 2 different contradictory things both seem to have very persuasive cases for being good?
You can't be more specific? Like,
well, I mean,
what are the 2?
I can.
Okay.
And I mean, gosh, I'm trying to think of how to put it.
I can try on that first part. I can
Okay.
try on that first part, though. Yeah, so when there seems to be good in 2 different options, a friend of mine in college is living with her boyfriend, and they're so happy, and they have all these fun weekend outings, and that seems pretty good, right? I mean, okay, so that if our will is always seeking the good, that there is going to be an element of goodness or perceived goodness in every action, okay? Unless it's so this is objectively morally wrong, right? We know that, cohabitation. But they're perceiving a good, and they're pursuing that good, okay? And so, in any 2 things I could choose, if I'm desiring to choose them, I'm perceiving a good in both of them. So I don't think there's so much of a convincing as it would have to be, time would need to be spent in prayer, asking the Lord to clear my intellect and strengthen my will to choose the good. Because of course, anything set before me that I'm interested in choosing is either partially good, that's possible, there might be a good within that, okay? You know, you take marital relations, beautiful, very good. Wrong context, okay, the act itself doesn't become wrong, it's the context, the circumstance, okay? So there's always going to be a good if my will is desiring to go after it, and if the thing my will is going after is not good, then it's just a perceived good at least. So I think that goes back to our original wounds in the garden of a darkened intellect and a weakened will, and I don't think at that point any persuasive argument with our friends actually is always the most effective. We can do it so that our own conscience is clear, but then we pray that God enlightens that intellect. Does that help? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
So there probably really is good in what they're looking at, okay? Or they wouldn't want to choose it.
going back to his question, I just thought, I always think that right and wrong, don't base it off of the modern official definitions of something. Strip something down to its most basic elements, and sometimes those elements are, like a loving cohabiting couple as opposed to a hateful marital couple. Those both have good elements and bad elements in them. One has love and one has marriage. But they also have bad elements in both of them. One has a lack of marriage and one has a lack of love. It's sometimes the question of what is the lesser of the two evils. And also, finding what the right answer is, I always approach it, shove something down to its most key aspects, and it becomes a lot simpler. Because if you try to define right and wrong at a legal level, you've already made a huge mistake, because already entered into some chaotic bureaucracy of confusion that you that no one can possibly understand. That as opposed to saying, okay, is gay marriage, gay marriage? What are we asking? Is it the question of and what you find is, are we questioning that a political arrangement can be called marriage, or that the two people of the same gender are calling themselves married? And there's all this other stuff that gets really complicated.
No, I agree with that. I would caution that we just be careful with the lesser of two evils things, because I would prefer not to choose either evil, right? And so, but I'm not trying to make light of that. It's a good point. Also, and I'll tell this to the girls too, we can sometimes bring ourselves down to the lowest common denominator. Well, if in this case this happened, could I get away with this, or can I do this much and not sin, or could I act this way and not and still be okay with the church? Or we think of it on a very base level. But what a much better question. I wish I had a crucifix here, a beautiful one. But what a much better question to say, okay, Lord, you tell me how far love goes. Okay, so I bring it down. I say, well, how about this? Can I gossip that much and still just be a weak human being? Or, oh, okay, you tell me how far love goes. And I think that's a more human approach, because it's not so much about what we don't do or what we don't choose, though that is part of the point of choosing. You pick something and not another thing. But it's more of, how far will I let you transform my heart? And how much will I be given totally to you?